Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today I'm going to posit the question, where would you go if you were to leave the Catholic faith? Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut era in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. So I want to posit this question because if Catholics don't realize the beauty of the deposit of faith that we have in Holy Mother Church, and many don't. We know that the studies vary, but for every 2 or 3 converts we get, we lose 8 or 9 Catholics, and many of those just go to Protestantism, typically evangelical, which is lazy Christianity. We have an episode on that, no offense to the Protestants. Or they just become secular atheists, or they're too much, they get co-opted so much by this world that they believe the lies of secularism. Which, if you look, I mean, we've talked about this before, atheism in itself is a byproduct of Marxism. If you look in the past, nobody believed in, there's no such thing as a God. I shouldn't say nobody, I mean, there's always going to be outliers. But as a whole, society has always believed in some sort of higher power. You can look at the course with the Greeks and the Romans. They did believe in a pantheon of gods. Hindus, they believe in a pantheon of gods. But there was never a time where we didn't believe in gods at all. But there's a lot of people that are leaving the faith to become essentially people of this world. But as a Catholic, a lot of Catholics who do leave, they leave for personal reasons. I want to remarry in the church won't let me remarry, so I'm going to go to evangelical church, for example. Or they don't understand the liturgy of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass. Then they go to an evangelical church where there's pop music, praise, and you can drink lattes in there and like, I'm sold. You know, and a lot of it is, I was hurt by a priest, or I didn't like what a priest said in the confessional, or they didn't let me sprinkle mimas of ashes in the river, and I'm out. But for those who are Catholic, or I'll just posit the question to myself, like, where would I go if I wasn't a Catholic, and where would I go? Would I really go evangelical? No, I wouldn't go evangelical. There's no way I would go evangelical. Let's just do the whole Protestant swath. Why would I go less to the close of the fullness of the faith? I would get 6 less books, 7 to 5 less sacraments, depending on which church you're going to. I would lose the devotion of the saints praying for me, and I praying for them, and for the dead. Why would I go to that? To mealy-mouth, bad pop music liturgies, or they're not even liturgies, they're services, where I'm taught false theologies like once saved, always saved, or sola scriptura, which all those in their inherent nature make you more of a lazy Christian, right? Because if you know, like with the Reform movement, that you are predestined to be saved, you're one of the elect, then where's the motivation to persevere to the end, as Christ tells us 3 times? He says, those who are saved are those who persevere to the end, right? Who live in a state of grace, who run the good fight, and run the good race, as Paul says in 2 Timothy, right? There's no motivation. I can just do a bunch of horrific things and I'm still saved. So I mean, that in itself makes you a lazy Christian. So I couldn't go to churches that don't believe in the 7 sacraments, because the 7 sacraments were all initiated by Christ, and they're all historical. We've always had the 7 sacraments. I couldn't go to a church that has bad music and endorses, depending on the church, could endorse gay marriage and could endorse abortion, but more commonly, they're going to support an ideology that is not close to the apostolic tradition that we were passed down from Peter. So there's no temptation. So like, if I were to leave the faith, like, where would I go? There's nowhere to go. I could go to mainline Protestantism. You know, on my Instagram channel, I post a lot of pictures of Anglican or Presbyterian churches, and you have to guess if they're Anglican or if they're Catholic. But it's the same issue there. I mean, those have been more co-opted by the radical left than the evangelical churches, because the evangelical churches tend to be more independent because they're run by, by families, or by a guy that's been gifted in speech and in homiletics. But I'd go there even less. I mean, you might get some of the mock liturgy like an Anglican church, but the Anglican church has been pretty co-opted, and a lot of them support contraception. We know they do, and so forth. So, like, where would I go? Orthodoxy. Okay, sure. We have an episode out here on Hank Hanegram, the Bible Answer Man, probably the most famous Protestant apologist. He used to have a lot of radio shows all throughout the United States. He went Russian Orthodox. Rushvi went Russian Orthodox, if you don't know who he is. And there's others who have gone Russian Orthodox. And we talked about in the episode, like, why do Protestants church hop? Sometimes they make a stop over there. Certainly, if I go Orthodox, and I think the best episode is trad cons or trad caths don't go. Here's 5 reasons not to go Russian Orthodox. I think a lot of trad caths think, well, if I go Russian Orthodox, they're not going to have a lot of the liberal versus conservative infighting that you see in Holy Mother Church. But no, they have it over there. It's even worse because they're splintered. There's different autocephalic churches. They can't even agree. They can't even have an ecumenical council, and their theology is scattered. Now, you will have the liturgy, and they have a beautiful liturgy, and they do have intercession of the saints and so forth. So there's a lot of trappings of traditional Catholicism for sure over there. But ultimately, you're in rebellion, right? The Orthodox are schismatics. They are in rebellion. So how could you support a religion, so to speak, or denomination, even though they do have apostolic succession, that's in rebellion? They've eschewed Peter. They've eschewed the primacy of Rome. And we have episodes here going back to Irenaeus and Clement of Rome and all these people that you can read the writings that say that wherever the Bishop of Rome is, so is the Catholic Church, so is the Church. So we don't have really time to talk about papal infallibility here and so forth, and we have episodes on that. But even though Orthodoxy would give you a lot of the trappings and devotions that you have in the Catholic Church, ultimately it's a schismatic church. And like with a lot of churches that leave Holy Mother Church, what has happened to the Orthodox since 1054? And really, I mean, 1054 is kind of an arbitrary date. They started breaking off with the Russian and the Greek and the Bulgarian and the different ones several centuries later, 15th century, 16th century, and so forth. But I mean, they're breaking away. They have too many of their own independent Orthodox kingdoms where they're squabbling amongst themselves and they excommunicate themselves. And as I mentioned, their theology is scattered now, and they themselves in the Orthodox world can't even convene an ecumenical council because they don't recognize each other's authority. And that's what happens when you leave the chair of Peter, right? Scattered to chaos, farther from the truths of the early Christian fathers, farther from the truths of the first several hundred years of Christianity, which was only Catholicism existed back then, to the point where you have all these scattered churches that believe that they're teaching an authority when they're teaching false doctrine. So where would I go? Nowhere. And luckily I don't have to go nowhere. I mean, there's never been a time in my life that I've ever considered leaving the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is historically exonerated. There's no other church that can claim to be the church founded by Jesus Christ. And we have tons of episodes on that. But there's no other church historically that can say that. So there's no reason I would ever leave the Catholic faith, despite the scandals, despite all the change agents and the bad bishops that we have here and there. Where would I go? I'm not going to go to a church of false theology and false doctrines. What? I mean, that's what Paul worries and complains about all through his New Testament epistles. Watch out for false prophets. Watch out for false teachers. So why would I go to those churches? Guys, post in the comments, if you weren't Catholic, what would you do? Where would you go? Now, I mean, many people, I wouldn't say many, there are some people who will be like, well, the church is an apostasy, and I understand this argument. But even those, I think those are the rad trads. They would be like, yeah, the church is an apostasy. I'm not going to stop being a Catholic. I might believe in, let's say, the revelations of Our Lady of Salette and some other places that believe that Rome will go into apostasy, but they will not leave the Catholic Church. What they'll do is still get the sacraments and go to an SSPX church or wherever church they're going to go to, but they're not going to like, the church is in false apostasy, I'm going to go to the Fourth Baptist Street down the street. They're not going to the Fourth Baptist Church down the street. They're not going to do that. They're going to stay Catholic as well. But either way, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button, share with others. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.